People think that the hardest thing about Hebrew is that there's symbols they don't recognize. And honestly, it's not hard, you just have to learn them. There's 22 symbols. They also think that it's hard because it goes right to left. They feel like it's backwards because that's not the way English goes. It's not really backwards, it's just right to left. They feel like left to right is backwards. The point is, both of those things, the symbols and the direction, you just have to learn those, get used to those. It's really not that hard. What actually is the biggest hurdle for people is that they don't write their vowels, and that takes a little getting used to. So, for example, in this word, they're going to put the vowels underneath, like this, like little dots and dashes. And so what ends up happening is in each syllable, you look at the letter, down, and around. Boom, boom, like that. Each syllable's like that. That takes some getting used to. So if you were going to write, in English direction, if you were going to write the word dad, you'd write D-A-D, each syllable. Just go down to check the vowel. That's the biggest hurdle that takes a while to get used to. But honestly, it's not that hard. I mean, how long would it take you to get used to seeing English words like this? Yeah, you wouldn't want to read a whole novel that way, but if you're reading a couple verses, it's not that difficult. So those are the biggest things. So now let's just dive right into learning the alphabet. The first letter is Aleph. It's a line down, a little curve, and a little curve. You can practice that as much as you want. Line down, curve, curve. Now, English letters set on the line, Hebrew letters hang from the line. And that doesn't really matter though. You don't need to worry about the line. So, line down, curve, curve. That's Aleph. Unfortunately, the Hebrew language, their alphabet starts with a difficult letter. This is basically a sound we're not good at saying in English. It's not a sound we're used to. So, for our purposes, just assume this makes no sound. And whatever vowel's underneath it, like if this is an ah, just ignore this and go straight to the vowel for pronunciation purposes. So, yeah, the first letter is a tricky one. You have no sound. The second letter is, that's Aleph, Aleph Beth. Right? Just a curved line and a line across. Now remember this little tail. It's got to have this little tail that comes across, otherwise it could look like a different letter. Now what's tricky about this is it can make two different sounds, a B or a V. Just like the English C can make a K or a S, this can make a B or a V. And fortunately for us, they put a dot in it when it's the B, and they don't have a dot when it's the V sound. So if this was a Hebrew word with the ah vowel, it'd be vab. Vab. That's not an English word, but those are the two different sounds that it can make, and that vowel there is an ah. We're not going to worry about vowels for today. I just want you to get the Aleph and the Beth so far. So, line down, line across. Don't make it go too far. Just a little tail sticking out right there. Yeah, that's just to distinguish it from other letters. Okay, so there's two letters right there, and with those two letters, you can make your first Hebrew word. Aleph, Beth, is the Hebrew word Av, which means father. You might be familiar with the New Testament, Abba, father. So there you go, Av, your first word with two letters. Not too hard. It might seem hard, but it'll get easier. Aleph, Beth, third letter. Let's get our line here. Third letter, Gimel. Just a diagonal line, and then a little foot. Like some kind of strange little tippy over tripod. I don't know. But that's the Gimel. Luckily for us, it only has one pronunciation, and it's pretty simple. So, Aleph, Beth, Gimel. We got those three. Aleph, Beth, Gimel, Daled. Now we got a Daled. Remember this little foot sticking out. And that's because there's another letter that doesn't have that foot. It's a resh. It makes an R sound. So the Daled makes a D sound, as you might have guessed. So that's it. A line and a line. A line and a line. Just keep that little foot there. That's all you need to remember. Now, the nice thing is you don't have to memorize these because you've got a chart right in front of you in your notes. So you can just say, oh, I'm looking, did I recognize that symbol? Where was that? Oh, there it is on the chart. Okay, it makes a D sound. Dalet. Okay. Right there's 4 letters. Aleph, Beth, Gimel, Dalet, Hey. Hey is a letter that makes an H sound, H, and it's just that. A lot of the Hebrew letters are boxy because of the way their font works. They kind of slightly fit in a square. So don't connect these though. It's very important that that's not connected because that'll look like a different letter. Hey, just makes that sound. There we go. Hey, put a vowel under it. Ha. Ha, ha, ha. Okay? Right there, 5 letters. Aleph, Beth, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav. Now the Vav, in ancient times, was pronounced wow, like a W, woo, woo, woo. But over the centuries, it's gotten changed through a lot of history. And I say Vav. If you want to call it wow, remember that it makes a W sound back then, that's fine. You'll hear me calling it Vav and using a V sound. It's not that one's more correct than the other. It's just, well, there's a whole story behind it. Don't worry about it. Anyway, it's just a straight line. Vav. Now, when you see it printed, it's going to have a little bit of a flourish. You know, just like in English A, it's going to look different printed in a book than it would in handwriting. You're going to see little flourishes on all the letters. And depending on your font, you might have, in English, a little flourish, or in English T might have little tiny flourishes. You're going to see that, but don't worry about it. For handwriting, we're just going to put a straight line down for Vav. That's it. That's all it is. It's just a line. Vav. It makes a V sound or a W sound. It used to make a W sound, right? Depending on where you're from. It's sort of like how you guys or y'all, they're both correct depending on where you're at and who's talking and all that. Okay, so Aleph, Beth, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin. Zayin is similar to a Vav, but it's got a little diagonal top to it. Zayin makes a Z sound. Zayin. Okay, Aleph, Beth, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet. Now this is our first sound we don't have in English. Chet. And it sounds like you're hawking up a loogie. This one is similar to the H, except it's connected and it's got a little foot up top. Chet. So that one takes a little practice saying, because we're not used to that. Other than this one, we pretty much have all the sounds in English. Chet. So just remember, you're joking. You got something caught in your throat. That's sort of the sound. Chet. Aleph, Beth, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Het, Yod, Ka. Chet, Het, Yod. Yod is a really interesting letter. It's the smallest letter. It's just, so if you were going to write, like baby, that's not a Hebrew word, that's an English word, but if you're going to write baby, look how small it would be in comparison. These would have to have dots to make a B sound. Baby. This is a Y sound, yeah. And just like in English, the Y at the end of a word can sometimes make an E sound. Other times, too, it can, in the middle of a word even, sometimes. But yeah, sometimes it makes an E sound. So it's a very small letter. And when Jesus says not one jot or tittle, that's what he's talking about, the Yod. And if you were to zoom in on this, it would look like that. But if you wrote it fancy, with a fancy calligraphy pen, it would look like this. And this little thing right here, that's what Jesus was talking about, the tittle. So he's saying it's not the smallest letter or the smallest part of the smallest letter will disappear from the law until everything's done. So that's the jot. That's the, what we call Yod, Y-O-D, Yod. It's just a little letter. And it makes a Y sound, but it can also be part of a vowel, just like in English. Aleph, Beth, Gimel, Dalet, He, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yod, Kaf. Kaf makes a K sound, and it's shaped a little bit like a backwards C. We have a semicircle letter that makes a K sound, and they do too. Of course, they're writing this direction. So that's a Kaf. Now, I need to tell you one last thing before we quit this lesson. Oh, there's still some more. We've covered about half the letters. Some of the letters are written different when they come at the end of a word. It's called a final form. So the Kaf, I like to think of it like it's got a little hinge right here. And when it comes at the end of a word, it hangs down. The hinge releases, and this part of the letter hangs down. So this is a final Kaf. So if you wanted to write the word, cake, you'd write it like this. Same letter twice, but this one comes at the end of the word. This one comes not at the end of the word, so it's written in its normal form. Normal form, final form. Cake, or keek, or some other sound. Okay? So there's 5 letters that have final forms. You'll see those in your notes, and we'll cover the rest of the alphabet next week.